All right. Well, the meeting's being recorded, which means it is time for us to get started. So, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Duke Career Conversation. As a reminder, this is a virtual career and professional development series designed to share the stories of interesting, successful Duke alumni. And we have one that I'm going to introduce in just a moment. So, reminder, this was launched in 2020 by the Duke New York board, but we're going expansive now. It's extended to Duke DC to support the alumni and members of the Duke community down south from us here, looking for professional insights and inspiration. For those that are unfamiliar with me, my name is Dan Nolan, Trinity class 2014, Fuqua class of 2022, and I'm thrilled, so thrilled to introduce today's featured guest, Ben Berchuck, class of 2004. Ben's currently head of content partnerships and acquisitions for FanDuel Sports Network, but that's not all for Ben. Okay, he's got way more to talk about here. 20 years of industry leadership as a media executive, not just FanDuel Sports Network, Meta and Facebook Sports on the list, Wasserman Media Group, all kinds of individuals that have crossed paths with Ben over the year, including a number of Duke alumni. And by the way, he's also a regular Duke guest lecturer on the business of sports media and serves on the board of the Duke Sports Business Conference. Did I get everything, Ben? Is that anything else I should add here?
Thank you, Dan. What a great intro. Appreciate everybody being here. I know this will be a great conversation with you. We've done this in person a few times recently, which has been great. It's fun to see some familiar names out there on the Zoom. And look, basketball season started last night, so we've all got to be feeling pretty good and happy to be in the Duke family right now.
Oh, man, the Boozer brothers looking very good right out of the gate against UCF. Hey, maybe we have another great conversation in person in April. Fingers crossed, knocking on all the wood that we need for that one. Hey, look, you mentioned Duke basketball. I think let's just start with a simple one here, Ben. Why did you choose Duke? Why Duke University?
Yeah, I was really fortunate that Duke was kind of my playground growing up. I moved there as a kid from New York. I moved down there in 1987, dating myself. But both my father and my mother worked at Duke Hospital in various capacities. So it was my playground. I was 9, 10 years old when they won the back-to-back titles. Kind of doesn't get any better than that. And so fortunately was able to get accepted back in the day, and really loved everything about the campus growing up and the vibe and the athletics and the academics, and growing up in the shadow of that. I sort of didn't really have another choice. It was written in the cards. Fortunately made it happen. So big Duke family and a lot of ties to the area. Still was just down there a few weeks ago. Always great to be back on campus.
You said you were living in the shadows, and then you went towards the light. You went over to Duke University. You actually attended. Do you have any favorite memories from your time when you were there?
I mean, on the sports side, just as an aside, we won the championship my freshman year, 2001. So that was pretty fun to be on campus for that with Boozer, the dad, Boozer Senior there. But honestly, the theme of this conversation, Duke really did launch my career. I was fortunate to take the business of sports class my senior year, which we can get into, and that really launched my trajectory. A lot of the people from that class, professors, I'm still in touch with, and so
Yeah.
clearly a core memory there. And then studying abroad was amazing and really piqued my interest in international business and working abroad and doing things like that. So great memories from freshman to senior year and beyond.
It's such a unique experience to attend a course and then be a guest lecturer for that course. I mentioned the Duke Sports Business Conference as well. How have you stayed involved over the years? Because you mentioned you had a tie to Durham and to Duke University, but it's another thing to remain active and still be a part of it.
Yeah, I think it's a little surreal to now be lecturing in that class. I think that just means I'm old, experienced but old. But yeah, Duke, the marketing management program is really fantastic. I took the business of sports class. It was taught at the time by a guy named Gary Stevenson, who's really a legend in the sports media industry. He's still out there today. He's the deputy commissioner of Major League Soccer. I was fortunate to be under his tutelage, and he had lined up internships for a bunch of his students. I was fortunate to get one of those, which I can talk about my career path. But I still like to give back. I like to come back to campus at least once a year to teach that class now. It's taught by Ed Teriyaki and another great professor, and meet students, talk to students, judge case competitions, and then I'm on the board of the Duke Sports Business Conference as well, which really was a student-run, student-launched initiative. This wasn't alumni getting together saying, "Hey, we should do this." Michigan has one, MIT has one. Duke's got a lot of big names, powerful people in sports media. This was a a student-led movement, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. And they've done an amazing job bringing speakers to campus, doing events, and kind of starting this network from the ground up. And so I'm happy to be a part of that, advise them. But really, it's the ingenuity and the spirit of some students a few years ago that really got that off the ground. So it's been fun to see them grow with or without the help of some alums.
It's borderline impossible to avoid seeing Duke people that are involved in the world of sports. I attended a conference last week that Ben, you and I talked about a little bit. Adam Silver is a speaker there, very well-known alum, but who does the giant media rights deal to bring on three new people? It's Greg Beaton, class of 2008. So anywhere you go, there are people involved in various places. And speaking of career path in media, I touched on this a little bit. Wasserman, Meta, where you are now at FanDuel Sports Network. Walk me through the path. Where did you start? How did you get to where you are here today?
Yeah, and so like I mentioned, I took that business of sports class. Professor Stevenson had lined up internships, and I thought, maybe I'd like to go to the NFL or the PGA Tour, kind of a traditional league path. And Gary said to me, you seemed interested in the media side of this business. Maybe you should take the Comcast internship. And I thought, okay, like most of my friends are going to New York or the Bay Area, not necessarily Philadelphia, but I trusted his opinion. And he said, you'll get to learn a lot about of all facets of the media world, and you'll touch sports and networks and Hollywood and studios and all these different areas. And so I started my career at Comcast, really, again, thanks to the advice I got from him and from my time at Duke. I spent 3.5 years there launching new products and services, things that were really cutting edge at the time, HDTV and video on demand and DVRs, right? Things that we just take for granted or have evolved since then. And then after a couple of years learning the media business at Comcast, I actually called Gary again and said, thinking about what's next. And he said, well, good timing. Casey Wasserman just bought my company. We're going to start a media consulting division. Do you want to come back and work for me? And so again, the Duke path and the Duke connection kind of leading me to another stop in my career. I was a media consultant then at Wasserman for the better part of a decade, and primarily consulting for leagues, teams, including the ACC. Working on college athletics and college basketball and football rights, and negotiating agreements, helping properties launch networks, and that was kind of really interesting as the media landscape evolved significantly in the early 2010s. But then towards the back half of my time at Wasserman, we started getting hired by some of the big tech companies that were looking to get into sports and didn't understand sports rights or what things might cost or what was available. And that really piqued my interest. Instead of going to maybe an NBC, ESPN, a traditional media player, to, what's Amazon doing? What's Facebook doing? What's Google, YouTube doing? And I was fortunate to jump on board with the Facebook crew in 2018. So there was a minute there where they were buying sports rights and testing premium content and doing live rights deals both in the US but also globally and around the world. And I had that itch from study abroad and other days to work in a more global business, and was fortunate to hook up with the team there. Spent 5 great years there learning the ins and outs of a big tech, a FANG company that has grown a massive business without paying for sports content and doesn't necessarily need it in the same way that a traditional broadcaster does. We can get into kind of the current landscape as well. And then after that, I landed here at FanDuel Sports Network, trying to reinvent what was the Fox Sports regional network business. So reinvent a traditional US sports media company that has rights to 30 NBA, MLB, and NHL teams. Redefine what sports fandom and viewing and consumption looks like in the future, add new rights and content to our portfolio. And it's feels like I blinked. I was on campus 20 plus years ago, and here I am now at this stage of my career. It's been a fun journey.
Before we touch on regional sports networks, which will be a very solid portion of our conversation here today, just because that's an area that you're heavily involved with now, I did want to make sure to touch on the sports rights negotiations that exist at the national level that you did at Wasserman, at Facebook and Meta, what you had exposure to at Comcast. It's a very different landscape. And it seemed like in the past there were a few players. You were going back and forth with those negotiations. Now there are so many different types of distributors that are on the market. I'm interested to hear your perspective on where we are today for the sports rights negotiations.
Yeah, I mean, it is a
landscape overall?
Fascinating and complex and ever evolving topic. When I started my career, you did your television network deal, and you really just worried about TV, linear television, and digital and social and all these things were not A, invented in some cases, but B, didn't have any value. And now, obviously, the landscape is much more complex. And so, if you're a sports league or team or franchise or property,
Mm,
you have to really think, who do I want my partner to be? But also what's important to them, because what drives an ESPN or what drives a FanDuel sports network is very clearly having the live rights to games, having exclusivity, being the home of a property, being able to tell fans night in, night out, this is where you can watch. And it's really the core piece of my business. I need sports or I don't have a business. But from my time at Facebook, sports content is a nice to have. It's not a must have. Facebook's going to be fine. YouTube's going to be fine. Netflix, Amazon are going to be fine without sports. They certainly use it to differentiate themselves and attract new subscribers, keep current subscribers. But the calculation and the value that a digital or a streamer might put on sports is very different than a traditional network. And even on the traditional network side, ESPN, for example, used to be ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPN, News, right? They had a suite of channels. Now a big push for them is ESPN Plus and pushing people to streaming. So if you're a league that's doing a deal with ESPN, you might get some time on television, but a big chunk of your games or inventory is going to be behind a streaming paywall, and you have to evaluate what that means for your business. And so it's complex both on the side of myself being a network and competing for rights with more players than ever before, from streaming to Fangs to others. And it's complex on the league side as well. Who is the best partner for me? Do I put all my eggs in one basket? Do I spread my rights? How do I think about live versus short form versus clips and highlights? And there's never been, candidly, I think, a better time to work in this business. Even if we all wish we could see around the future, we can. And there's always evolution and change, and we all as viewers experience it. But kind of behind the scenes, it's fascinating on the business side.
So it's so interesting whether you go to the NFL, the NBA, the Masters, you see this complex mix of, yes, a traditional broadcaster that might be on a broadcast channel, or you have a streamer. And Prime Video is a great example of that across what I just talked about for the NFL, the NBA, and for the Masters. Okay, let's clear up a common misconception out of the gate here. How is FanDuel Sports Network different and distinct from FanDuel's betting business?
Yeah, it's a good question that I get a lot. And so FanDuel has their own betting business, obviously, one of the large players in sports betting. FanDuel Sports Network is a independent company that FanDuel, the betting company, has bought the naming rights to. So it's the former Fox regional sports networks. Again, we have the rights to 30 plus pro teams. If you live in one of our markets, you probably know us well. For example, if you're in LA, we have the Clippers and the Angels. If you live in Miami, we have the Heat. Detroit, the Tigers, Red Wings, Pistons. So we're the home of your local sports franchises, but we are a separate entity, an independent company. FanDuel has partnered with us. They've bought the naming rights to the company to help promote their activities, their marketing. But I am not a FanDuel proper employee, and it is a distinct entity, a separate business. But it is something that comes up quite a bit.
We talked about national and local for rights, but what's the latest data tell us about local versus national viewership trends, and how is that associated with the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I came back into this business about 2 years ago, I'd been working at Facebook Meta and looking really at global data, global sports. And when I came back to the regional sports network business, I was really shocked at how massive the audiences still are, night in and night out, on our channels and other RSNs like Yes and MSG here in New York, NESN in Boston. And it makes sense if you think about it. Again, using Miami as an example, we're the home of the Heat. We're going to have 75 plus of their games. So if you're a basketball fan that lives there, you're watching our Heat game. You're not maybe as interested in, Milwaukee versus Phoenix on ESPN, the national game of the week. So there's still really strong local audiences around the country, people tuning in, night out to watch their teams and the local coverage. And we just wrapped our baseball season. We have rights to 9 of the MLB clubs. It was the first year we had all the in-market streaming rights for our clubs, so you could watch on any device, any platform. And we
And
publicly put out some data. Oh, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say real quick, Ben, for those that are unfamiliar, can you explain that a little bit? Just having an understanding of, okay, it's on a channel, but it's not on streaming. Uh, Walk us
Yeah,
through what
a
that
lot of
means.
these rights deals were done in the early 2010s when Fox still owned the networks. And so you've got a deal signed with an MLB club. It might have been done in 2014, and it didn't contemplate some of the current rights that are necessary to be a broadcaster these days. So deals have to be reworked, new rights have to be added, new terms. And so, you know, as a partner, you can't just decide where to show content. You have to have that agreed to with not just the team, but the leagues as well. And so in the case of baseball, this was the first year we had all the rights to stream all of our clubs. And we recently put out some data that we were averaging about 1.5 million viewers a night across all of our markets, which is comparable to a national telecast on an ESPN or another network. And so, yeah, it's been a journey where I did some of those deals as a consultant many years ago. And now here I am on the other side, having to rework and change them as the media industry has evolved. Because, 2012, 13, 14, the rights that you needed, the landscape was very different. Digital, social, fast, all these other ways of distributing content weren't
Yeah.
even really contemplated at the time.
Yeah, and FAST, just for those that are unfamiliar, free ad-supported television. It's just another digital way that you can consume your content. I want to stick with baseball here for a second, Ben, because this was an interesting year for baseball. So much of the narrative over the last 4 to 5 years has been this is a sport that's starting to fade. The fandom is starting to fade. The viewership is declining. This season, across the board, it seemed like local and national viewership, attendance, everything seemed to be up. What has the data told you about why? What made this season so spectacular?
Yeah, I think they've got great stars. I think they've got great storylines. I think you're seeing now the trends that it doesn't always have to be big markets. Um, I think the local stories are still really strong. It also takes up such valuable real estate in the summer. It's
Mhm.
got the unique position that it's not competing with NBA, NHL, NFL as much as some of the other sports. But I also think that in my world, you've seen some really interesting new voices emerge that are kind of adjacent to the game. And we did a really interesting partnership last year with John Boy Media, that's an MLB digital publisher. And if any of you are baseball fans, you might have heard of John Boy. And it's kind of a YouTube, Instagram, like digital creator who offers a really unique perspective on the game. And so even if you're not watching for 3 hours, you can get these really fun breakdowns and videos. And I think, basketball has really grown up in the age of digital. It's kind of, Adam Silver's even talked about that, like where highlights are really important to the league. And I think baseball has done a really good job getting to that place as well, both from the league side, the local side, and then also some of the third parties like a John Boy that have done a good job telling stories about the players, the managers, the culture of the game that people really want to see. When I was at Facebook, the biggest category of content that did well outside of live games was what we called sportainment,
Mm.
which is that mix of sports and entertainment. It's the game around the game. It's the mascot helping with a marriage proposal. It's, the football player trying to make a soccer penalty kick. It's kind of crossovers and things. And so there really is a place for all different types of content in the sports media landscape. And baseball, I've seen, has become they've had a lot of fun the past few years with some of that.
Yeah, it's so funny you speak to these things where, NBA League Pass, when instead of a commercial break, if you're subscribing, you see the in-game entertainment instead. And over the years, it's become almost a cult following of, let me watch these babies race across half court. Let me see the person that's brought in from the stands to try to time the gas pump right on the proper time frame. Um, let's speak about production innovation real quick. We spoke about the different distribution channels and where everybody is watching their content, but how you create the content is also different now. New programming approaches have come about because of this modern era. What has FanDuel Sportsnet Sports Network, I should say, done over the past several years to address those innovations?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things I would speak to there. I mean, one is internally, we've tested different camera setups, outfield things in baseball, as an example, speaking, to what we were just talking about. We've also tried to learn from some of our partners. We did a deal with Overtime, which is a basketball league for top high school prospects, and the way they film their content, they've got cameras on the coach's head in the huddle, things differently than we've done them with the NBA, for example. We're trying to learn from partners that are doing things differently. I loved what FIFA did this past summer with the ref cam at the Club World Cup and testing that in live coverage. I think there's lots of things we can learn from that. And then just recently, this past week, we announced a partnership with Omaha Productions, which is Peyton Manning's company. They do the Monday Night Football simulcasts and lots of other things where you can have the watch-alongs on different channels in addition to game coverage. So, like everybody, we're trying to figure out how to serve all different types of sports fans, from traditionalists to more casuals, and looking at different ways, both in the game, side by side, and other ways to keep the content engaging.
Yeah, and you mentioned fast channels earlier, the ability to have 24/7 feed with ads going constantly. From what I understand, there's an interest there at the FanDuel Sports Network level. What would be the involvement in that specific distribution method?
Yeah, so these are the channels. If you turn on your Samsung TV or you're on your Roku, these are free channels where you can watch content. And there are a handful of sports networks out there, combat sports, some other things. But we're looking at that space because it would allow us to, one, have a 24/7 national feed, but also to have some fun with some emerging sports, some things we may not have the space for on our networks because of the NBA, MLB, and NHL. And things like curling ahead of the Winter Olympics, where we think that would get a bump coming out of the Milan Olympics coming up. Can we do some fun things with sports like that might not have a home on traditional television? From my time at Facebook, I've seen sports like squash and triathlon, CrossFit games, surfing attract really big audiences when you put this content out for free, because they have passionate, active, engaged communities, oftentimes participating in these sports themselves. And so I think a fast channel for us would be really exciting because we'll have the time to fill and we can spotlight cool stories and things that I think are emerging sports that might have potential to grow, in addition to supplementing our core pro coverage on our networks.
Yeah, the CrossFit Games, one of the more interesting events that I've ever covered. Very, very interesting to hear the dialogue in the stands about what constitutes a pull-up. Big, big conversation topic at the CrossFit Games. You mentioned this desire to cultivate, to build something that may start as an emerging sport, but become and blossom into something that's viewed more widely. Uh, I feel like an interesting, you know, potential direction we could go with this then is the most rewarding project that you've done, whether that's at FanDuel Sports Network, if it's at Wasserman, if it's at Meta. Uh, what's one that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I think most recently, I'll use a recent example because for my current role at FanDuel Sports Network, but we've built an incredibly strong and successful women's sports vertical since I got here. We've added several hundred live games across a variety of properties, including Athletes Unlimited, which is a pro league for volleyball, basketball, and softball. There's some Duke ties there. John Patrick, the founder, I believe, has kids at Duke, maybe. We have WNBA rights to the Lynx and the Fever. We were a inaugural partner of the PWHL, the Women's Pro Hockey League, the ice hockey league, that's done unbelievable numbers for us. We have the rights to the Minnesota franchise that's in one of our markets. And then I mentioned Overtime on the men's side, but we also were the first television broadcaster of the Overtime Select Women's League that's for female top high school prospects looking to go pro. And so we've built that vertical. We've done some great deals there. We've seen massive audience and ad revenue successes, and we've done it because it's good business. So it's been fun to build that as our fourth vertical, in addition to NBA, NHL, and MLB over the past 2 years.
Yeah, it is awesome to see the growth of women's sports over the last several years. And wouldn't you know it, the more exposure that a sport gets, the more successful it ends up being. Wonderful to see across basketball, soccer, volleyball, all the different areas that you're mentioning there. I know we only have a few minutes left, so I want to make sure that we hit some advice categories here. And I kind of want to break this into two different pieces. The first one is, out of college can be a really difficult time to find that first job, to work your way into something that you have a lot of passion for. What advice do you have? And maybe you can allude to back to the story that
Yeah.
you told before about your Duke mentors that you had in the form of a professor. What is the key to getting that first job out of school?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that I try to tell students, which I can start with, and then maybe we can talk about kind of current careers. I think take advantage of the things on campus. Get involved with DSBC, the Sports Business Conference. Be part of that committee. Take MMS courses. Try to meet professors and alumni in the field. Go to the Demon events too. I think Demon Weekend's coming up in November. There's always speakers from entertainment, sports, media there. I think another thing you can do on your own is try to get fluent in the language of the industry.
Mm.
So, Sports Business Journal, Front Office Sports, Sportico, Sports Media Watch. Some of these are paid, some of them are free, but try to consume the sports business news as much as you can so that you understand what's going on. There's also agencies like Wasserman where I worked for a long time. They have a lot of internship programs. They don't publicize them super well. But if you're active on LinkedIn, if you find Duke alums that work at these companies, there's generally spring, summer, fall rotational internships. And Wasserman's in Raleigh. There's other agencies in the Triangle area where I know they have a pipeline of kids from Duke and UNC and other colleges. But those are things that I would do if I was on campus. And then I think for people who already are in their career, early career, mid career, any stage really, you don't have to have previous sports industry experience to transition. We need people who are strategic, who can think about what the future holds, who are savvy maybe in digital and media, other things like that. But a great launching pad for people in this industry is actually the brand and sponsorship side. This industry is really driven by people who buy commercials and the Nationwide Insurance and Amex and all these brands, and they have massive departments dedicated to sports and entertainment and sponsorships and events and activations. And so there's a lot of ways in that aren't always NFL, ESPN, the big names. Like some of the best career paths and kind of experience you can get. I started at Comcast, a big company, kind of learned the ropes. You can go to one of those brands that is a sponsor and is active in sports and entertainment, even if it's not a league or a team or a federation or a network. And so I think there are multiple paths and ways in depending where you are.
Yeah, it's great advice on how to build a career in sports, whether it's business, media, any type of avenue to get to where you're wanting to go. Well, unfortunately, ladies and gents, we have hit time. Uh, I could talk to Ben Berchuck all day, every single day. In fact, I'm pretty sure this is the fourth time that we've talked over the past month. So you can tell that we've got a lot to talk about. It will not be the last time that we talk, my friend. Thank you so much for your insight and for sharing your time with Duke alums. As always, you are the best. So yeah, nice virtual round of applause. Put your posts in the comments for one Ben Berchuck. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody, for taking the time to join. I know everybody's got busy times and schedules. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up future programming. Come on, we're all here. Let's talk about it. So thank you for attending today's Duke Career Conversation, but save the date because our next Duke Career Conversation is on Wednesday, November 19th, 5:30 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, featuring Laura Highlanday, class of '06, also Fuqua, 2012, Associate VP Chief Engagement Officer of the Duke Alumni Engagement and Development. Registration is coming soon. I think it also might be in the chat as well. Thank you again to everybody for attending today. Thank you once again to Ben for joining us here. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday evening, a rest of your week, and let's go Duke.